in hospital, and we were able to see him for the first time since he's gone into prison. And Aaron Brady looks to me like the classic jailbird in that he's obviously spending his whole day in the gym.
Yeah.
Looks very bulked up, and amazingly then the pictures came out in the front. We used them in the paper, I think, and then later online. But very quickly I was alerted to something I didn't realise existed, but it's a Facebook site, and it's a campaign for Aaron Brady run by his father.
That is a clip from Nicola Tallant's Crime World podcast she done in association with Sunday World editor Neil Donald, I believe is his name. That little clip you're after watching there is, it's at the introduction of the podcast, and we have Nicola Tallant telling us that she didn't know that this campaign even existed. And it was amazing, for some reason, that she got a reaction to the front page headlines and the double page spread. It's not very coherent. It doesn't make much sense as to actually what is amazing, but it's amazing that she made the front page. I don't know, with such a pathetic story that's of no consequence to anyone really. But then what I want to question here is, she didn't know about a Facebook page, a web page. She didn't know what it was called. Now we can say categorically, the Justice for Aaron Brady campaign has been sent to her page, to the Sunday World, all her colleagues. As each and every video is released, it is tweeted and sent to their respective accounts. Some of them are blocked, some of them don't receive these videos. But having said that, the Sunday World was more than aware of the Justice for Aaron Brady campaign. And I also want to highlight the fact that she was alerted to it, so she knows about the campaign. She knew a little bit about us thanking her for showing the height difference of Aaron alongside the prison guards. So she's aware of it, and she should have been aware. If she's doing her job correctly, she should have watched all of the previous videos we released in relation to the newspaper article. And because as we move through this podcast and look at it, we can see clearly that the homework has not been done. And it's just a pickled, put together effort to try and salvage some sort of kudos from a pathetic article that it was, with all its inaccuracies and incorrect information, which continues through the podcast. So what we'll do now is we're going to have, that's the introduction part of it. We're going to have a look at, again, more information that's wrongly portrayed in this podcast.
Obviously,
he was extradited from the US.
Extradited from the US in 2017.
That long?
Yeah.
And he was tried in 2020.
He was tried convicted in 2020.
So he's in jail since his extradition, or
I think he's in jail since his extradition, because there was another charge that was dealt with, I think, then subsequently. So I mean, he's been.
Aaron Brady was not extradited from the United States of America. He was deported. Now, we don't want to be pedantic about this. It's only words. Aaron was expelled from the United States of America. But facts are facts and details are details, which will become very important, hopefully very soon in the future, because there are serious issues with how Aaron's paperwork was dealt with in the United States of America. And we have said that all along, that there's questionable Homeland Security involvement and questionable evidence disclosure on how Aaron was actually expelled from the United States of America. And we put Aaron sitting alongside the likes of Daniel Cahill and the likes of Christopher and Ronan, who actually had extradition warrants, and Anthony had extradition warrants live for them. So all these people who give statements, criminals and illegal immigrants, give statements against Aaron, and they remained in America. So again, we don't want to be picky or being silly over words, but the fact is these are allegedly two professional journalists. And for the respect of the man who lost his life, they should get their information right. I think that's only expected with any professional journalist. And as I said after the previous clip, Nicola Tallant has told us that she was aware that someone made her aware and let her know that there was a response to her article in the newspaper. And I highlighted very clearly that she got this information wrong. And here we have two journalists, and you can see, to all intents and purposes, if you watch the clip again, they're paddling for the information. Aaron's trial began in 2019, the 8th of October 2019, not in 2020. Now, Neil Donald does savour a little bit when he says Aaron was convicted in 2020. He knows the information's wrong, but it's a poor attempt at professional journalism. So we're going to have a look now at another clip, and this is showing, again, this is the beginning of where we say Nicola Tallant is trying to peddle the curated and narrative that has been created by the state. And she mentions her friend in the NCBI who took over the case from the word go. But we'll look at that in more detail later on. So we'll just have another quick look at another little clip now, and it'll give us some idea into the curated and false narrative that's been created by the state and peddled by people like Nicola and Niall.
It happened. I was up at the scene the following morning, and Lordship is outside Dundalk. It's minutes literally from the border, and you were able to see how the gang who had carried it out had shot off up these sort of a very narrow street and were over the border literally within minutes. It was the first thing that caused a huge delay and a problem with the investigation. They were gone, were gone across the border. There were suspicions about who they were, but it was a case that was a slow build.
A couple of issues here with Nicola and Niall, where they've jumped on the bandwagon right away. And Nicola tells us she arrived at the mother scene the morning after, and lo and behold, she knew exactly where the raiders went to across the border. Before anyone else knew, obviously, or maybe they did know. And it's very difficult to understand what she's talking about here, because she mentions narrow streets. There was no streets involved in and around the rural setting of Lordship Credit Union. The country roads. Now, she may be just using the term streets, I'm not sure, but it doesn't make any geographical sense to actually the area in which she's speaking about. So there's 2 points here. We're going to show you now very quickly the actual facts that the raiders did not cross the border. Evidence that became to light during the course of the trial back in February, March and April. It was highlighted and found the incident where the Volkswagen Passat came the wrong way around the roundabout at Ballymascanlon and headed south on the M1. And very credible and a very time-precise witness puts a Volkswagen Passat coming round the roundabout the wrong way and heading south towards Dublin on the M1. And once again, we'll just remind people that one of the raiders who attacked Bernadette's car, and Bernadette being one of the credit union workers who was parked in the credit union car park, broke her window and shouted at her. And Bernadette has always said, and she's confirmed once again in February, that the man who attacked her car had a Dublin accent, which again is very important, and it leads on correctly to the real story that we say was hidden by the prosecution and the Garda Síochána, that a Volkswagen Passat came round the roundabout at Ballymascanlon and headed south on the M1. Now, we have serious issues with the evidence that was used to point the car heading north, sort of towards the Burnside. And the evidence was used to create that narrative. But that's for a later date, and we'll see how that pans out. But we're just going to have a quick look at what actually did happen. We're going to look at the testimony of a racehorse trainer who was in Dundalk Racecourse that night. So let's orientate everyone. So there we have Lordship Credit Union. Up to the Ballymac roundabout is denoted in the blue lane. So we have the getaway car travelling from east to west. And then we have Dundalk Stadium at the bottom of that little picture, up to the Ballymac roundabout, and we have a journey heading south to north. So what we have at Ballymascanlon, and we also know that the vehicle left the credit union, headed towards the Ballymascanlon roundabout, and this gentleman actually seen, as you can see here, a Passat coming the wrong way around the Ballymascanlon roundabout. So here we have a situation where the two vehicles meet on a roundabout. So the poor horse trainer is heading home, and he had to brake. He explained how he had to be careful, and his concern obviously was his horse in the trailer behind his Jeep, and he gave details that there was a number of people in the Passat that came round the roundabout the wrong way and turned right and headed on the M1 south towards Dublin. Now, before we go into that aspect of it, what we're going to do is just have a little look at the timeline of both of these vehicles. So I have up here on the screen, the last race finished at 21:23. He said he went straight to the Jeep and he put the horse on board. He actually said 3, 4, 5 minutes, got the horse into the Jeep and started into the trailer and left Dundalk Stadium. The drive out of the stadium and heading towards Ballymac roundabout takes about 3 minutes. So we have a situation where the horse trainer is arriving at Ballymac roundabout somewhere in the region of 21:32 p.m. Then we move to the robbery at Lordship started at 21:29. The robbery lasted 58 seconds or 1 minute into 21:30. The car takes off and heads in the direction of Dundalk and the Ballymac roundabout at high speed. Passes a number of vehicles along the Ballymac Straight, and indeed other witnesses suggest that the car had to stop and brake at the roundabout because of oncoming traffic. And according to those eyewitnesses, obviously the car was on the outside lane. And from the times we know, and this is fact, we have the Passat arriving at the Ballymac roundabout at 21:32. So here we are again. We have the two vehicles approaching the roundabout at 21:32. And I say without any doubt that we cannot but say that the vehicle that came round, the Passat that came round the roundabout the wrong way round and headed on the slip road for the M1 South towards Dublin was certainly the vehicle involved in the Northern robbery. As described by the racehorse trainer, there was a number of people in the vehicle. So what is the possibilities of another vehicle doing this absolutely lunatic move on a roundabout and heading south on the motorway? And obviously this is evidence we hadn't seen before, and it was found by the two boys' legal teams, and the trainer was obviously asked to come and give us evidence. And we know now that the vehicle used in the Northern robbery headed on the M1 south towards Dublin. which totally eradicates the already ludicrous story of someone travelling 32 kilometres into Northern Ireland down towards Newton Hamilton police station to burn out a vehicle that was used in a robbery and a shooting. It was never a starter anyway. And the times, the CCTV footage and the manipulation of evidence was absolutely disgusting. And we will be revisiting that again. There are other little bits of information that became available during the course of the most recent trial that, shall we say, confirms 100% everything we said during Aaron's campaign and the 200 videos. And we hope that little clip and the details and the graphics showed quite clearly that almost certainly the people who shot and murdered Detective Garda Adrian Donoghue were in that car heading south on the M1. I think the clip covers that in good detail. And just finally, going back to Nicola's previous clip, she said this investigation was a slow burner. And we have, and we will, as we look into the podcast more, into the whys and why our son was targeted. But I think she's getting this note in to cover the Gardaí's backsides here, to say it was a slow burner and the border was in some way a barricade to their investigations. We were told multiple times during the course of the court that the cooperation between the PSNI and the Garda Síochána could not be faulted. It was excellent. So this thing of a slow burner is nonsense. The reason it was a slow burner is because they went down the wrong rabbit hole. So I just want to play a little clip because we are going to interact 3 productions here. Obviously Nicola Talent's Crime World, The Making of a Detective, created by, I'm not sure who was created by, Stephen Breen, I think, from The Sun, had something to do with it. It's about Pat Marry, and hopefully those of you who haven't heard it will listen to that podcast, because it gives a lot of detail about the complete mess the investigation was in. And we're also going to be taking little clips from the primetime programme led by Barry Cummins with the assistance of Owen Reynolds and Robin Schiller, all investigative journalists. And I use that word investigative very lightly. So what we're going to do now is just listen to a little clip of Pat Marry speaking himself from a podcast created, The Making of a Detective. So just listen to that clip now.
Pat felt like he was starting from square one all over again. It brought him back to those early dark days in January 2013.
I sat down with the team the first day I had taken it over in 2016, and I looked around and I never saw as many pale faces and dormant looks. And I said, lads, what's happening? Like, what's, no breaks, nothing. And
so from the horse's mouth, so to speak, Pat Marry is telling us there, when he came back into the investigation at the end of 2016, almost 4 years after the murder and robbery, the whole thing was a complete mess. He sat round the table in what he calls Fort Apache, Dundalk, the Garda barracks in Dundalk, and they had nothing, not a shred of evidence, not a scintilla. And I would have to say, and if you look back at our videos, you'll be able to see where we have highlighted how the reason why they had nothing is because they went down a rabbit hole. And we've put that firmly on the shoulders of Pat Marry and Sergeant John Maroney. So at the end of 2016, the investigation was in total disarray. And that is when the scheme to create, to get anyone, get someone, and that's when it all began. So that ties in with how Nicola Talent is trying to portray a narrative about slow burner and the cars went north, when there's absolutely no evidence that the car went north. And it's something we will cover again anyway. The car that was used in the modern robbery was a silver Passat. The car stolen and burned out, stolen in Clogherhead and burned out near Cady, near Newtown, Hamilton, was blue. So that in itself, and we'll critique that when we go to Mr. Donald explaining to us about circumstantial evidence. So thank you for watching. We're going to keep looking at this video and keep bringing these little bits of information to those people who maybe haven't caught this information before. So we're looking at Nicola Talon's Crime World podcast. We're looking at Pat Marry's podcast, The Making of a Detective. It was created in association with the Irish Sun and Stephen Breen. And we will also be taking excerpts, clips and information from the Primetime programme led by Barry Cummins and ably assisted by investigative journalist Owen Reynolds and investigative journalist Robin Schiller. So we'll bring those three productions together and show quite clearly how the circumstantial evidence spoken about in this podcast is complete and utter nonsense. We've rubbished it entirely. And how these three productions are prepared to peddle a false narrative created by the Irish state. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again in the next video.